So yes, we can go live at any time. Good afternoon and welcome back to the afternoon session of the Budget Committee on January 13th, 2021. We are going to be continuing with the 2021-22 fiscal framework. Councillor Purdy, you were up next.
Thank you. Hi. I was so upset you went to lunch before I had my, because I had my confidence ready to go. So I'm going to speak as obviously a non-politician, someone who has never seen a municipal budget before, and this may be very naive. And I was trying to pull. I think you all answered my first question, but I'm not sure because I don't understand exactly whether this is allowed or not allowed. And this may be very naive, but about the commercial tax rate, does council have the ability to change the policy of how that tax rate is? Pardon? Yes? No? Did I hear someone just say a quick answer? Yes?
I would go over to either Jane Fraser or Bruce Fisher for that response.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to the councillor. So council has the authority over the rate that it establishes for commercial tax.
Okay, so this was me thinking, has it ever, and maybe it has ever been considered to maybe model the commercial tax rate like it is, our tax rate is for personal income. So the higher the income, the more percentage of income tax is taken off the salary. And I don't know how that would be assessed square footage. See, that doesn't seem fair either, or maybe gross or net income of the commercial property. I'm just thinking of our restaurants, the small businesses that have been walloped this past year, and it's just layer upon layer. I just can't even. It makes me feel sick to my stomach to think, okay, we're going to now charge you more for your commercial space, even though the government has said, you know, for many months this year, you've not been able to provide service and generate income. And even when you have been able to, it's been reduced to 50%. So to me, that just feels wrong. And regarding Councillor Cleary's suggestion to have the residential tax shoulder the commercial to give the small businesses, that also doesn't sit well with me. I'm thinking of our affordable housing crisis, and I know that apartments are considered under the residential tax rate. So, and I know there's been a cap put on for a very short period of time, and I've also heard that this isn't even necessarily a good thing for long term anyway, but it's a short-term fix. So how is that going to affect? Already our rents are very, very high. We do not have a lot of affordable housing rental units. The rents are very high. It's and it just made me think. I was out walking my dog during the lunch, and it just made me think of a human body. Like when you're playing a game and you twist your ankle, that ankle swells. All of the good, healthy blood goes to that ankle and it swells. And you're put out for a period of time. You have to ice it. You have to baby that ankle, and then if you do it properly, that ankle will fully recover and you've got full use of your body again to do whatever you want. And I feel like council has done this amazing job through the years, from the little I know, of this forward thinking, big vision planning for, you know, modernization and low, you know, net zero, like all kinds of amazing ideas. But I feel like we have a sprained ankle, we have a broken ankle, and it's not. I don't think we can cut services. And my goodness, my people are not going to be happy about that green bin not coming back weekly this summer. But what a matter of maybe readjusting where the monies are going. So maybe that tender budget, the advanced tender that we passed yesterday, maybe we could look at maybe some of the 100% for this period, just maybe adjusting that to 90% of that budget being approved, and maybe we can reallocate some of that money to the services. But if we have a broken ankle and we just ignore it, that can do incredible damage for the long term. So that's just my 2 cents worth, and thank you.
I'm wondering if we could have Mr. Fisher or Ms. Fraser respond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through to the councillor. So the sprained ankle is actually not a bad analogy. The thing that you want to do with tax policy really is do no harm. So you don't want to fix one thing and have spillover unintended consequences in somewhere else. So it really is looking at the whole thing when we do tax policy. So I answered your first question by saying that council has control over the rate for commercial taxation. Council has very limited control through legislation, either the Charter Municipal Government Act or the Assessment Act, as to what that base is. So what it is that we can actually use to apply the rate to determine what the tax revenue is. So on commercial assessment, there are a few models. Residential is basically the value of your home. Like, to overly simplify, it's the value of that building. Commercial, there are others. So there's market, there's net income, there's asset under construction, a number of things. Depending on what the type of building is, they do look at how much revenue that is coming in. So there are different classifications within the assessment system. What we can do is we can level 3 different rates, but it's urban, suburban, rural. That's in legislation. So that's the only way that we can impact that rate. We cannot differentiate in legislation on commercial. We cannot give businesses a benefit. On affordable housing, we do through our nonprofit tax and low-income tax. We do have a few levers that we can pull to assist on that side of it. It obviously is not, going to be forgiving 100% of taxes and different things. So it's really looking at all of those mixes that we have. This is a global budget, so the rate is calculated and recommended by staff to council for their review in order to do all of those aspirations. So in order to do a number of the things. So that's really how it all comes together.
Okay, thank you. Over to John Trace for a couple of minutes.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I think Jane's done a great job on the assessment piece, but it might be helpful for councillors if Bruce were to add a little bit with respect to the other 2 factors which the municipality can now use with respect to commercial taxation. I'm thinking of frontage, Bruce, and square meters on the property and how those could be tiered.
Yeah, so we were given some additional authority in how to levy taxes. We could levy commercial taxes on frontage, size of the building, square footage. We could vary it by area of the municipality. So we do have these additional levers, and we spend an enormous amount of time looking at how we can use them. There are some things, though, that we still can't do, which complicate everything. So, for example, we can't differentiate between how much tax a restaurant pays versus a warehouse or a big box. We can't do that under the Act. And we can't tax the lessees differently. And so the big problem with a lot of restaurants and small businesses is that they actually lease in a mall or a strip mall. They don't own the building, and we're still required by law to tax the owner. And so that's kind of the hurdle. So it all kind of comes back to Jean's original comment, do no harm, because there's a real risk with some of these ideas that we've looked at, that we fix one problem and we create another. And so there's some good information in the CPED report that went forward September 28th. So I think that's good to look at. And there's some other reports that we've done kind of looking at the areas, but there are no quick fixes or silver bullets here, even though we do have a few levers to pull.
Okay, thank you very much. And over to the CAO for a minute.
So thanks for those questions, Councillor, and thanks to Jane and John for your comments, and Bruce. The only thing I would add to this is the question around whether we can use, we can adjust advanced capital projects or capital projects to fund other operating items. I think that was sort of the nature of the notion that you're putting on the table, if I'm not mistaken. So advanced capital is actually funded through 2 ways, really: debt and capital from operating. So, council can make a choice to put less money in capital and operating. It's not what we would recommend, obviously, because when you do that, you're either going to have to reduce your capital expenditures to offset that, or take on more debt, right? So, the advice that we're giving you is capital is a separate item from the operating budget. The only connection there is capital from operating and the debt repayment and the payments, principal and interest payments that are funded through the operating budget to fund the actual debt. So there is some flexibility in capital from operating, except, as Jane says, you don't want to do any more harm. So if you use less capital from operating, that means you're actually taking on more debt or doing less projects overall, right? Well, that's kind of an important consideration and a financial principle that we recommend highly. But again, council is in control of that decision. The other area of flexibility was discussed this morning, which is the area, and we haven't really settled on that, as Jane pointed out this morning. We haven't settled on the short-term funding, right? So the $100 million loan issue for cash flow purposes, we have not settled on that yet. We're close, and there may be some flexibility in that number, right, to reduce the total amount of spend on the operating side. In other words, to reduce the tax payable, the average tax payable, or to fund other things, right? So to your question about how do you fund other things, it'll be through either tax increases or diversion of a decision that says we're not going to take on that loan, therefore there's about $20 million there of money that could be used for other things. That's how I look at it. I don't know if that helps or not, but I just want to put that out there.
Okay, thank you very much. And Councillor Tuttle, are you with us? You are. Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I echo Trish's comments about having all my thoughts together and then breaking for lunch and having 5 phone calls and okay, here we go. So first of all, I just want to say that I appreciate kind of the uncertain times within which we're operating here, and how hard it is for all of us and staff to really, for council and for staff to really think ahead about, this next year, and that we're basing a lot of things on assumptions that, I think are reasonable assumptions based on best, estimations and the research and information we have to date, but nonetheless, a lot of assumptions. Over the last few years, we've had a lot of growth. And in that growth, we've come up with some amazing kind of aspirational projects and big capital projects kind of based on that growth. But, right now we're finding ourselves in a very, very different situation. And, amongst all that growth, I do think that we didn't take care of some of the basics that needed to be taken care of. And in particular, to comment that Councillor Mason made, that all this growth has been happening, and with that comes increased demand for services and recreational facilities. Traffic calming, for example, is another one. And that we do need to focus on that. And I would really like to see an emphasis placed on those basic things for the people who live here today and have lived here for years previous, to start to see some investment at the community level in just getting, basic recreational facilities upgraded, new facilities built or started to be planned, etc. 2 comments. One is about the 8% growth in apartment assessments, which, when we look at what's happening with the affordable housing issue, the majority of that is happening with rental, and the majority of those rentals are in apartments. So, I'm just wondering if someone could comment between the connection between the assessment growth that's happening with apartment units, how that is likely to impact rent, what's driving that assessment, Is it just low vacancy, or are there other factors driving those assessment increases? And as a municipality, how we might, you know, even though we see the average residential income only increasing by a little bit, most of that is coming from the apartment growth. So just some comments around how that's tied to rent in our affordable housing crisis. The second thing is I just want to remind people that the commercial tax reform originated out of the massive assessment increases we were seeing in certain parts of the city, and the ability of businesses to pay tax on those massive assessments. And just to give some context, in 2016, when I looked at this, a small business on Agricola Street seeing a $40,000 to $60,000 increase in 1 year. Costco had a $1,000 decrease in their assessment that same year. So Costco paid less that year. Small business on Agricola paid significantly more, and that's where we were looking at really having an assistance to small business was based on assessment increase. Right now, COVID and the pandemic, like that's a different scenario, and I don't know if different tools are required to address that or what options might exist by applying for tax relief for some small businesses, particularly those that have triple net leases where the tax is directly apportioned to their rent. But or how you would define a small business. We know CRA defines small businesses as businesses that earn less than $350,000 a year, which in many cases those would be the small retail businesses. So those are my comments and questions, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the council. I'll start off, and I'll ask Bruce to go into a bit more detail on the specific taxation. So the growth in apartments at 8.1% is the result of the development that we're seeing. So it's based on cost of construction and what it is that we are seeing. As you pointed out, they are taxed at the residential rate, which is 3 times less than commercial. And apartment buildings are not capped. And so when we're talking about apartments, these are greater than 4 units. So they're not capped. So what you're seeing is as the market changes, they are going up there. The impact on rent, the setting of rent would be obviously there's a whole bunch of things that go in it. It's your financing costs, all sorts of different things. Taxes is one, based on a lot of work that has been done, a number of surveys that have been done. It is a small portion, but it is important. How we address that for affordable housing, I mean, we've seen where the province has brought in rent control. So they have some direct levers. I think it's the way that we work with the nonprofits and people that are putting affordable housing in on residential. So there's been, permit fees have been raised. There's been some other measures that have gone into place. We are looking at a number of different policy changes that really help in those areas where we can have direct control over. To do those sorts of things. So there is a link, there to the monthly rent in an apartment for sure. Most of these apartments that are being built now are at what we call condo quality. So they're very high end, nice fit and finish with them. So once again, that drives the assessment as well as the rent on the other end. And then assuring that through our own policy, our own planning policy, that there's a certain amount of units that are designated as affordable. So it's the ability to afford that. On the commercial and the small business, I mean, you're 100% right. We're very involved in that work that was done on the impact of small business in geographic areas that were having hot markets, where the assessed value was going up quite quickly. So looking at it through that. One of the challenges is with the definition of small business. And what exactly is that? There will always be winners and losers, no matter what your definition is, whatever your cutoff is. If you set a rate at $100, the person at 101. So those are the things that need to get carried in. and layered in with small business, as pointed out, is often, or it's not infrequent, that the locations that small businesses are in, they're renting that or they're leasing it. They do not own that property, and the taxes get passed through their lease. And it's then if the taxes are reduced, what is the mechanism that gets put in place to ensure that is the small business owner operator that benefits from that tax reduction versus the property owner that's just getting the benefit but is still collecting the same amount of rent on a regular basis from the small business. So those are some of the broader ones. Bruce can certainly go into more detail about the impacts and some of the nuances of tax policy around those.
Yeah, and I think that's a pretty good summary, Jane. On the apartments, we have 63,000 dwellings on the roll this year, 63,350 dwellings on the roll this year from apartments greater than 4 units apiece. And there are a lot of condo quality in there, and there are others that are not condo quality. We don't know, we don't have the ability to levy a tax rate just on apartments or types of apartments, because some apartments obviously are quite are higher end and others aren't, and so we can't differentiate there. So our tax is really a tax on the property, and it's paid by the apartment owner, as opposed, and we have very little ability in order to get at the underlying income and the ability of individuals to pay. Presumably the apartment owner is going to pass some of those taxes on, but we ourselves don't have any control over that or any direct knowledge of how that owner is actually going to do that. So I know that might not give you as much information as we'd all want, but that's kind of the system that we have.
Thank you. It does, that I think we just do need to keep that in mind when we're, looking at raising taxes about who is going to be impacted. And by and large, it seems to me that rental apartments will be impacted much more greatly than single family homes on this.
Okay, thank you very much. Feel free to come back, Councillor Cuddle. Over to Councillor Daigle-Gammon.
Mr. Chair. Thank you, Jane, for this presentation and for the beautiful context, especially for the councillors. And thank you to returning councillors for your patience to have to listen through the first section. I'm very much comforted by the clarification, Jane, that you gave in Councillor Manson. We did say that 1.9 is not cast in stone. When I read the motion, sorry, can you hear me?
We can hear you. There is a little bit of distortion, but we can generally hear you.
Thank you. So I just want to say thank you, Tony, for the clarification around the 1.9 and what the process is, because when I read the motion and when some of the residents that have sent me emails, they read this as it's 1.9% increase. So it may be more and it may be less, and there's a little fear in that as well, I guess. And the other thing that I'm a little concerned about, I guess, is that 6 million is cut from business units. And all day yesterday, we talked about the safe communities and the investment that we need. Also the investment that we need in some infrastructure and at the community level, which Councillor Cuddle spoke to so well, and a few other councillors. So when I think about the 6 million that was cut and I look at the last page of the report, I wonder if there's a way that we could see what was 2019, 2020, to see what was the previous year. So the path of change from the March proposed to the June approved. It will help give me a little perspective on what may have been gained or lost in that process, because as Councillor Blackburn said, it's 3 budgets in a year. So we're seeing 2, and it would give me some good background to be able to see that as well. I'm also really interested to see about how reserves are populated and the criteria under which that they are used. So I look forward to understanding that in the coming weeks and months, I guess. And I would really like to see how we support small business, but not at the expense of residential. So where are the other places and how do we do that? And where does the partnership come in with other levels of government to see where there is support for small business. So what's our role in relation to provincial and federal and those jurisdictions? I think that would help me. And if we don't have to take out that loan for $100 million, I think that would be to our benefit, because then would I understand correctly that means it's a $20.8 million saving in that year one? So thank you.
Thank you. Over to Ms. Fraser.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, great. I've got some stuff popping up here. So thank you for that, Councillor. So absolutely, we'll give you the context and the history on the business unit budgets that they've had. Context is really important in these discussions. And once again, that is the starting point for the business units. I think, as the CAO said, department heads come in, we show you what it means to get to that number that finance has given them, and then it's up to council to decide if they're willing to take those reductions and what that means to service. And then there's, at the end, we do a big summary, and there's an opportunity to either add things back or reduce things. So that process will unfold, as Councillor Mancini was speaking about, so we can do that. The reserves, every reserve has its own business case, and this business case is approved by council. If you go online, the big blue budget book is there, and at the very back there's a tab that gives you a summary of what each reserve is. I can send it to you, to the link, and to everyone else, just so you don't have to look around for it. But really, it just summarized nicely what the intent of the use is, what money goes in, and then what money comes out. Some of them are legislated, so we don't have options like parkland reserve, landfill closure. We have some of the forward pads that are managed by independent external. We have to put money back into refit. So there's some rules around there, so you'll be able to see all of that for that purpose there. Yeah, small business and the partnership between the province and the federal government, it really comes down to where the authority is. We are, I mean, as you've heard, and I know it's not what you want to hear, and we wish we could say something differently, but we are limited in what we can do with it. So whether it's on depends on the nature of the business. If they're providing services that normally would be done by a municipality, there's a few things that we can look at. It's really on the fees that we charge, which is not a big portion of that. So it is something that we keep top of mind. So I hope I've covered off all of your questions.
Thank you very much. Councillor Daigle-Gammon, if you would like to come back a second time, that would be great. But at this time, let's move on to Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Jane and team, for all the work that goes into making such a complex subject relatively comprehensible to a non-accountant like myself and some of my colleagues. I'm wondering if you could maybe highlight some of the things you'll be able to do once there's a new IT system, just high level, what we would be able to do that we can't do now because of that. And also, are there ways to have targeted incentives through taxes that would support our social goals? For example, can we give some sort of incentives to have more affordable units in apartment buildings? Can we have incentives for people building energy efficient buildings? Are there ways that we could incentivize some of these things that council wants to see?
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Chair, through you to the committee. Oh, so our new SAP business transformation system, what that will allow us to do is it'll stop us having to run a billion-dollar organization on Excel spreadsheets and have version control issues, as I discovered late last night. But really what it does, so on the tax side of things, currently our tax system is at least 20 years old and it's not supported. So when we put this in place, what that's going to allow us to do is we will be able to gather information on the the types of properties we have, we'll be able to break it out. So it'll be very easy to do some analysis on those and to really see what the distribution is. We'll be able to see where businesses are coming up. There's a whole host of information and data that we'll be able to gather from that. So it's incredibly powerful from the tax and revenue point of view. It will also allow us to be able to do predictive analytics as we go forward. So if we're looking at, we have regional plan, we have some development growth here. What's it looking like over there? We'll be able to track assessment growth in certain areas so that we can actually start to do more robust modeling, so that the order of magnitude isn't as great as it is. Procurement is another model that we have in there, which will allow, once again, for us to understand where our spend is. It will allow us to become more efficient in how we contract and how we buy supplies, keeping our inventory levels at the right spot so that we're not sitting with stock that's not being used. So that allows us to have some efficiency and some savings there as well. Better vendor interface, better able to track the costs of things. Once again, taking that information, that data, doing predictive modeling to match against the capital plan. So if we're seeing construction growing at a rate of 5% through the tenders that are being awarded, what does that mean for long term for capital investment? Should we increase it? That sort of thing. And then, just being able to give data to council so that when you ask a question such as, what is the commercial residential split? I have that dashboard. You have that dashboard. So you can see when you want to see what the budgets have been for the business units, you have that dashboard. So very quickly you can click on that. If you're interested in fire, I can see where they've been getting, steady increases. So that makes sense. You can see there. You may have been able to tell this is a bit of a passion of mine. So I'm going to stop. And I'm going to say that really, the power that it unleashes, it really brings us forward to be able to answer questions today. But more importantly, it's that planning in the future and what that data allows us to do, even knowing how much it costs us to clear snow. Like what a snowstorm costs us. So that's that. On incentives for affordability, we have to look to the legislation, of course, and I mean, I'm sure you've heard that it's very prescriptive. We have it. It's been broadened. To be fair, it has been broadened somewhat, but it is still fairly narrow. So it's looking at those areas. We do have grant programs that some are in there. We do have planning policy, as you're aware, that allows us for density bonusing. We don't have everything that we need just yet. So it's about getting those powers in place and being able to do those sorts of things. And then anything that we have direct control over, like permits or fees or other things of that nature, would be areas that we would go to help with incenting.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Over to Councillor Kent.
Thank you. Excuse me. So this, thank you very much, Jane and Bruce and everyone who's contributed to this. This is really great to be able to, well, just to sort of wrap our heads around at this stage what we feel our constituents are able to tolerate, what our property tax payers are able to tolerate, etc. And thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the insight into, I just want to confirm that I heard this right, that the 1.9 increase is actually less than what was projected last year. Is when you said pre-COVID, when we would have done the budget deliberations last year, that 21-22 was projected higher than the 1.9 increase? Is my understanding of that correct?
I can answer that. Jane could too, but I hate to interrupt, and the chair will rightly tell me I'm out of order. No, what I'm saying is our total expenditures planned for this year are less than total expenditures in our original budget of last year, which would have been passed on March the 25th or something had it not been for COVID. So expenditures, in spite of the fact that we have increasing in wages, total expenditures are proposed to be less than they would have been last year before the recast. Jane, is that correct?
That's absolutely correct, Mr. Mayor. We wouldn't have given a projection going forward. This is the first year that we're starting back with the 3-year outlook.
Okay, I too want to weigh in on Councillor Clary's suggestion on this. I think he's on the right track, sort of, but I have a really big issue with us shouldering as well the residents, the property owners, with to just provide benefits to the larger businesses. Without question, the small businesses and medium-sized businesses are those that I don't want to see heavily burdened here. But what I want less is the taxpayers, the residents, the property taxes to change. I'm okay with holding them, but to change that, and certainly not to change it so that others who don't really need it or have the ability to thrive and survive during this economic crisis related to COVID. So that's my 2 cents worth on that. And Councillor Mancini, I really appreciate that you took some time to help with clarifying this for this process. In fact, I think that there's that kind of approach at the beginning of each session would be particularly helpful. And because I do have a question right now that is related to that process, I want to understand that today's motion, wherever we land, is a motion within the budget committee that then will be later ratified in regional council. Am I right? Yes or no? Yeah. Okay. So if that's going to happen, when we get to regional council, if after we've seen all the detail that comes within the departments and all those layers, do we have the ability to affect that then as well? Yes. Okay, great. That's good news to me, because I'm struggling with the notion of not having all that detail to consider, knowing that, or I guess not knowing that I believe in you staff as well aware as we are of the need for constraints and restraints and maybe squeezing where we need to be able to release a little funds in another area. And I'm just really uncomfortable with doing that today and setting a tax rate, having that go out to the public, and then us have another shot at it, and that by that point we might have everybody riled up. So the facts are that we all campaigned on a number of things, but we also have this pulse of what is tolerable at our constituent level. Every chance I get, and I did it the other day, and I think Councillor Purdy has mentioned it, a few others, that I am really struggling with the notion of traffic and road safety being as complete of a budgeted priority this year, more than anything in the future. I feel like this is the year we absolutely have to make a difference here. And yes, that might mean, and Councillor Mancini articulated very well, that if we don't increase or if we, at the Board of Police Commissioners, there will be quite a debate on how those, we don't get to decide on how the money is allocated, we get to influence. We don't get to decide, we get to influence. And we have to be cognizant of that. But I really truly believe that everything we do in relation to road safety is a joint effort between TPW, Halifax Region Police, Halifax RCMP, and community. So community has to take ownership a lot of some of this. So what we do, I just want to make sure that we have opportunities for debating that. So this leads me to a point of priorities yesterday. So one of the priorities listed was tourism. And I may not be popular saying this, but I don't know about you, but this is the year that people are going to tolerate the fact that people aren't traveling. We're asking them not to. We're asking them not to go outside of their communities. They're not able to get on planes and travel. They're not able to come to Nova Scotia and see. In some cases, as we've just experienced, people aren't going to want to come to the city centre, to HRM, to the capital. And we don't know how long that's going to be. So going into this year, I feel like there's going to be a tolerance for some less investment in that one. And that's just an example. that is rationalized through the COVID experience. And so again, I come back to, until I kind of see what those budgets might look like, I might want to ask for us to change, which I think many will, to sort of shift things around. And if shifting things around can allow us to hold the tax rate, then that to me is a better approach than to create an expectation. To be frank, I don't think our taxpayers are really in the position or in the frame of mind to accept a tax increase. If we can hold, unlike Councillor Mason, I don't want that to have to increase. I want to know clearly for me.
Councillor Kent, it is 7 minutes now. I'm going to ask you to come to a close.
Okay, I'm just glad that we have this opportunity. I hope that helps everybody else. Thank you for the answers to that. For now, I'll wait and I might come back. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Wow, that goes.
Yep. Ms. Fraser or Mr. Fisher, any response?
Yeah. So certainly, Mr. Chair, maybe to expand a little bit on what the process is. This is the starting point. This is staff coming forward and saying, given the services that we provide, given some of the council's direction on various initiatives, the capital, all the different components that go in, and what we're seeing for assessment growth, when you look at it, this is what we're recommending to start with. So we need a planning point to start from. So we're recommending 1.9 on commercial, residential. 1.9 on commercial gives a small reduction in the rate. That's what that is. What will happen over assuming that council says yes, as a planning tool, I'm happy to go with 1.9. What will happen is the business units will come forward with how they've met their target. So, and their target is $6 million reduction. So what they had to do to meet their targets, and these are the items, the overs as the CAO spoke to. So within this target, I cannot deliver X service. There'll be a dollar amount there. And then council will say, ooh, I don't know if I can live with that. We will take, then council makes a motion on the items that they want added back, or even items that are missing, and we add them to a list. We put all that list together, and then we come back towards the end of the process, like I think it's the second last meeting at the end of the process, and then go through everything. And with that, we have an impact on the tax rate beside it. And then council looks at that and you debate it, because something that, you know, your first day of budget committee, that $200,000 cut may be something that you're not really in favor of. But when you see the totality of everything else, you may be able to live with that. And then you can also adjust that amount of the reduction. So you don't have to add back the full 200. Maybe you can get some service improvement with only adding $100,000 back. All that work gets done, and then finance staff goes away, and we tell you what we recommend. Well, we don't tell you. We come back with what our recommendation is on how we're going to fund that. So it could be that the tax rate has to change. There could be that we have a surplus. There could be reserves that we could use. So we do come back with a plan that then gets approved by council. And it's at that time that the budget is set and we have your final rate. So this 1.9 is what we've built the plan on. Changes to that are certainly at the will of regional council, and we'll come back with that probably in March.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Stoddart.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Jane, and your team for this wonderful report. The detail is amazing. I, like Councillor Purdy, am new at budgets, so, you know, forgive me if I ask a question that, you know, might not be, what can I say, a question that's been, it might be a question that's asked before. But during this budget process, our counselors, do we table this meeting until the next budget meeting, or is a decision made today? That's one of my questions. The other question is, I'm not sure about residents increasing their tax bill to cover small businesses, because I know a lot of residents in my district have been affected by COVID, have been laid off their jobs, lost their jobs. So to be burdened again with holding up the commercial tax rate and having to pay more than 1.9 would cause them some grief. I know the residential tax bill is based on the market value of your property, or sorry, the assessed value of your property. So, you know, there will be a difference in what one person pays other than the other, but bottom line is you're going to pay at least 1.9. And I know there'll be some resistance to that from residents. The other thing I wanted to ask is for small businesses, has anyone taken in consideration the amounts that the province kicked in as relief? Because some of these small businesses had their rents delayed or deferred, and they also received a certain amount of credit for help pay for their employees that they weren't able to support during the lockdowns. So I just wanted to look at some of those issues and see if they're in consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Where this is a set of numbers that would define what the budget process, define the starting point for the budget, I don't know that we can defer or delay that decision. So I will be asking for a vote on the motion for that today. As we go forward, we will be able to tailor what those numbers are and move that tax rate up or down as we choose. But at this point, I would be looking for a vote on the motion today. I'm going to hand the rest of it over to Ms. Fraser and Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So certainly on the small business and the relief from the province, whether it was, you know, it's a small business or the guaranteed salary for residents. So that, I mean, obviously that's very important. We don't have a mechanism to be able to feed into that and to gather it. What it's able to do by providing that rent relief is to keep the businesses open, obviously, or as much as possible, which feeds into our economy and the vibrancy of the economy. The impact on the hospitality industry is very, very important for HRM. Not just from a tax point of view, but that broader, the vibrancy of the city and what it means to come to Halifax and how we attract conventions and how we, you know, vacation travel, business travel, all of those sorts of things. Don't have a direct impact on, you know, the revenue, the bottom line of HRM, but it is extremely important for HRM as a region. So we would work closely with the province on structuring relief around taxation if that was to occur with them. So it's really about how can we take the tools that each order of government has in their toolbox and work together in order to help benefit either homeowners or business owners.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to go next. Everybody has spoken at least once. Councillor Smith, if you would like to speak, that would be great. But I'm going to take a couple of minutes and then we can start on the second round of speakers. As far as the tax base being split on the commercial side, one of the things that we have talked about a bunch in this meeting is what we can do about that. So this is just a heads up that I plan on bringing a notice of motion to the next council meeting where we ask the province for the authority to determine what a small business is and see what we can do about taxing a small business differently from other sized businesses. On slide 45, Ms. Fraser, you had mentioned tax-supported debt, and I am, it is just my nature to be in favor of us government not having debt. The example was used that debt is used when a business wants to get into business and they will go into debt to buy a store, to buy something, and then over time they pay that off, and so that at the end of the day they will be out of debt. I have not seen a government that is out of debt. I have seen debt continue and grow, and kudos to staff and previous councils who have done such a good job of reducing our debt. But I think to be in a state where we have to increase debt, except for extraordinary measures, I will have a really hard time with that. One of my questions about the reserve classifications, you had mentioned 3 classifications for the reserves, and we're coming to an actual question now. We have been able to transfer money between reserves. I'm wondering if those reserves have crossed those classifications. So would we, would we be able to transfer money from a reserve in one classification to a reserve in a different classification? The second question or point relates, and I've already communicated with Mr. Fisher about this. We have 2 items mentioned in the recommendation. One of them is a 1.9% increase in the tax rate. The other one is a 34.1 per $100 rate to cover the mandatory expenses for the province. The wording of this led me to believe that this was a new item. It is, we are seeking to establish this rate, and I would just like some of the history on this, and just to make sure that this is not the establishment of a new tax. In fact, this tax has existed for a while, and we are simply changing it, and would appreciate a comment on that change. And I guess my final point is in relation to the office space, the commercial office space. I was pleased to see that commercial office space in Halifax is less than commercial office space in both Sydney and Moncton. I found that to be rather interesting, and I'm glad that it is that case. In any case, I will leave that with Ms. Fisher and Mr. Fraser. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So on the reserves, as I said, each reserve has a business case. So the way that the money can move back and forth is through approval of audit and finance. So if there is a desire to move money from one place to another, we cannot, if it's a legislated reserve, so we cannot take money out of the parkland reserve as an example for anything other than its permitted use. Solid waste the landfill closure, that is legislated by the province. So it really depends on what the uses are. And this is what the second stage of the reserve review, which will come in June, is looking at. It's looking at how many of these do we have? We have a number of small reserves for vehicles, for equipment. Should they not all be bundled together for capital assets, as an example? So really looking at what the intended use is and what the best way is to manage those to make sure you're getting full utility out of them. So that's some of the work that's there. On the area rate, no, this is the way that the provincial mandatory cost has always been, I shouldn't say always, but certainly since my time has been put in place, and I expect probably since amalgamation or a number of years. The reason that we've brought it forward this year as a recommendation is really for transparency. This is a large amount of money. It's, I think, $168 million this year that through other budget processes honestly didn't get much line of sight. So it really is about saying that despite, so our budget to run HRM is $827 million. But in addition to that, we also have to gather almost $170 million to give to the province. So it's really about that transparency is what it is. when you look on the tax bill, HRM has always broken out what that component is. So it is, it's just highlighting it a bit more, and you're not the only counselor that's asked about that either, Chair Russell. So that's really what that is. Yeah, and your office space one I think was just more of a comment. So I think that's answered everything.
It has covered everything except one, and that is that the rate for the provincial mandatory contributions has actually dropped this year. It was 34.4 cents last year. It is 34.1 cents this year, based on the email that I received back from the finance department. I'm going to, so thank you very much, Jane. I'm going to proceed down the list for the second time speakers, starting with Councillor Outfit.
Thank you, Chair, and I appreciate you letting me go ahead. I have to go and get some stitches removed, although several of you probably would like to remove them for me, but that's Tony's all over that, I see. Okay, so listen, thank you very much. Great discussion, great questions, and it's interesting to sit back and hear the new councillors, you know, bring up some of the things that we've talked about for years and have been near and dear to some of us, like the mayor and Tony and Wei and Sean and others when it comes to small business. And of course, staff is doing their job by trying to point out the pros, the cons, the risks, etc. So it's all very interesting. But I really do strongly support what I heard from Trish and Patty and others regarding the help for small business. The objective was always, though, to keep any assistance to the commercial tax base within the envelope of the commercial tax base. This means that in the example Patty gave of the $40,000 jump, and I can give you a whole bunch of examples of those on other streets in my district and other streets in HRM, you know, when that small businesses went up $30,000 or $40,000 and Costco's went down $1,000, that is what we've been trying to address for years. Be it based on the size of the building, be it the number of employees, the income, the geographic location through these economic development zones, these sorts of things. These are the things we're trying to do, but not shift the help that we're giving to the small business to the homeowner, but shift it to the bigger businesses where one would argue that's a rounding error compared to something that could kill a small business. So just to give you the background on that. Bruce, I know you and I have this little dust up every year, and I love you. You're one of my favorite residents, but you know, for I don't know how many years now, for 10 years, we've heard all these reasons why we can't define a small business and how if we give the credit to the landlord, it won't trickle down to the tenant. Well, I know it will, because I rented office space downtown. And when the taxes went up, I got a separate letter and it said your rent's going up because the taxes went up. When we didn't use as much power, I got a letter saying the rent's going down because we didn't have to pay as much on common area power and things these years. There is a way, if we have the will to do so, of helping small business. And we have helped small business with opening up lands in business parks, cutting red tape, allowing them to move into sidewalks, you know, this sort of thing. We have done a lot to help small business, but in my opinion, we have not done much to help small business when it comes to taxation. Just my first question, and listen, when I talk to these small businesses, when I tell them that the BIDs, the Chamber and HRM haven't been able to come up with a definition of small business, you can imagine the reaction. When I tell them we haven't been able to help them yet because our computer system won't accept it, you can imagine the reaction. I won't use the language in public, but we are going to get there. But we only are going to get there if we as a council want to get there. We are going to have to lead this. The Chamber's not going to lead it. The bids aren't going to lead it. Staff can only bring us so much information. Sorry, there's a cat fight going on in behind here, and four-legged. And there is, you know, we're going to have to lead this. And I mean, there's even things and Bruce, maybe you could speak to this. There's two questions I have. Tell me what they do in Toronto, where even the height of the building. If your residential building is less than 3 or 4 stories, your commercial building is less than 3 or 4 stories, you're taxed at the residential level instead of commercial. There are things that can be done that are being done elsewhere. And the other question I have for you, Bruce, is when did we actually receive this permission from the province to do things like taxation based on frontage, based on economic developments and zones. I think we've had this permission for 3 or 4 years now. So, you know, if we want to start doing this, it's up to us, and we've got to start doing it. There are so many things we are doing well, and we are economically strong. And that's has not come easily. It's been hard work by a lot of councils and a lot of staff. But I still think that we are not doing enough to help the small business taxpayer, and I do not want to shift it to the residential taxpayer, as most of you have said. Anyway, Bruce, a couple questions for you there about timing and about what they do in Toronto, etc. Thanks very much. I get to go to the dentist now, if that's any comfort to anybody.
Yeah, thanks very much for those. So the challenge isn't so much defining small business, because there's multiple definitions of small business. The challenge is more that we tax the property owner. So it's finding a way to actually ensure that any savings pass through to the owner. And you're correct about triple net rents. They do pass those through. But the other side of that is the increases. Because if we have a system where we increase the tax on large properties and decrease it on small properties, then every small business owner in a big property will get an increase. So every small business within the mall will get the increase, because that will be passed through their triple net rent. So that's really more, I think, the concern on the unintended consequences of what we could end up with. I think you had some specific questions on Toronto. We've done some research in that, and I know we've provided it to council in the past. We'll check it out. I believe it's not dissimilar from many of the models that we've looked at, where you would have stepped rates. If you look at what we provided to CPAD in September, we were looking at several stepped rates. So it would be similar to that. We actually went a bit further than Toronto did in our September CPAD report, because we had stepped rates plus zone rates. So it was a little bit more complicated. In terms of how long have we had those powers for, I believe it was the fall of 2016. When we got those specific powers. So they have been there for several years, you're correct.
Okay, thank you very much, Tim. I note that you're on mute. Okay, thank you. Over to Councillor Mancini.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I'll be within my 3 minutes this time for sure. Most of my questions were answered. So very quickly, just a comment I want to make. You know, we're not like other orders of government, where we cannot cut a check to our residents or small business or any of our businesses. So the way that we, you know, this morning at the Halifax Partnership that the mayor hosted, we talked about growth and economic growth. And I personally believe the way that we help grow our economy here in HRM is by our capital projects and making sure those big projects happen, like Cogswell and Windsor Street and so on. And so I just ask my colleagues to keep that in mind as we progress through this budget process, which also means for many of councillors, and particularly our new councils, that means a particular project that you really want in your district, you may have to sacrifice this year, so we can make sure we have the funds available to support some of the other things we want, whether they're large capital projects or if it's more enforcement from police, whatever the case may be. So, Mr. Chair, my questions were answered. I just wanted to state that, and I thank you for that time.
Great, thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Lovelace.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This has been such a great conversation, lots of good ideas. I'm really excited to continue this conversation over the next few months and really work through where it is that we're going to go as a municipality. You know, it is shocking to hear the amount of funds that we're collecting for the province, not really having any say whatsoever about where those funds go. But, you know, I think I just want to sort of reiterate or maybe just elucidate in some way the tax rate comparison, Mr. Mayor, that you talked about. Across the country, we have municipalities that are raising taxes, property taxes. And I think that we really just need to look at apples to apples, right? Calgary is not a good example to use when we consider the tax rate of what they're doing there and what we're doing here. They also have a housing crisis, but they also have in-house social workers. They have a community service department. They have, you know, services that we could only dream of at this point for this municipality. And so, you know, I think it's important for us to think about what services do we offer, can we offer, what can we cut, or what can we do more creatively, as Deputy Mayor Outfit has just talked about. You know, creativity is extremely important as we move forward, especially in this post-COVID recovery period. And just to the point on commercial businesses, I think we're talking about commercial businesses, but we're also talking about small businesses, and that is not the same thing. You know, we have just welcomed a new business into Halifax called Uber. They don't have commercial business space here. They're not paying a commercial tax bill. But yet they're operating here in our city. We have multiple businesses that have exited out of commercial business space and are now operating in their home. And so are we. So I think it's really important for us to think very clearly about what that definition is of small businesses, because it's not just the bricks and mortar. And I'm sure, Bruce, you've had this conversation many times about how do we define this small business. But I just want to, you know, I think that really is the elephant in the room, and that we are not taxing all small businesses. And I'm sorry, that's my dog. We're not taxing all small businesses. We're taxing those at a commercial rate that have bricks and mortar and have that property assessment. And I do want to also suggest, while Councillor Cleary, I appreciate your comments about reducing the burden on small businesses. I don't think that reducing that commercial tax rate is actually going to assist the small businesses that we need to support, because the majority of those folks are you know, burdened with that residential property tax bill. And I will just I'll just end there and take care of my dog. I'm going to close the door. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Response from Jane or Bruce?
No, I think it was mainly comments. You know, certainly we've heard a lot of comments in the similar vein on small business and commercial taxation and the concern around that. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just to pick off where I left off, I just have some questions about the debt piece that's in the report. Jane, you indicated you would be coming back with an overall view in June, was it?
Yeah, a longer term view with debt policy fundamentals in behind it, and what the strategic initiatives look like further out.
So when you say like the strategic initiatives, you're talking like transit, you're talking Halifax, you're talking these sorts of things?
Correct. So IMP. So it's those really big projects, city building projects that have really been squeezing what we're going to start referring to as the base capital budget. So we've been trying to fit them in that box, and there's just not the capacity to address existing assets and maintain them at a proper level, and then still do these new ones.
Okay. And so will that piece, when it comes in June, because I mean, some of these big picture ones might involve future tax rate changes too. Would that be part of that mix as well?
So because the majority of these projects they're large and they're not going to occur in the current capital year or even next year by and large. I mean, the electric bus purchases are slated for 22-23. That gives us a little bit of time to do some work on what the debt looks like. So the thought is to take, as it stands right now, there's $10 million that is notionally allocated to go to strategic reserve. That 10 million for this year would go in a pot, and it would increase. And what that would be is that would be used to pay the principal and interest on the debt that we take out for a very narrow, very specific group of projects. So instead of having to jack the tax rate, what it does, it allows for smoothing of the.
Jane, it sounds like you're breaking up again a little bit.
tax.
Bruce, I'm wondering if
to out, or we end up with to go.
Jane,
Am I kicked out?
It sounds pretty close. Would you like to try again?
Yeah, I just saw everybody dropped off. So am I back?
You are back and we can hear you.
Yeah.
Computers are horrible.
Okay,
I get it.
so I guess I got the, am I frozen again? Okay.
Maybe turn the video off, Jane. We could at least hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Where was I? on the debt, yeah. So I don't know how much you heard, but the idea is to build up a bit of a. I'm lost again.
Bruce, would you mind?
Aren't I?
No.
You are still here, Jane. We can, but Bruce, would you mind taking over at this point? Thank you very much.
I'm gonna leave. I'm gonna log out and come back in.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
All right.
Thank you, Jane.
So the idea is to have the reserve build up some funds. So it's like saving up to do something that you want to do. So we notionally have 10 million allocated in this budget to go into strategic projects. It would go into a reserve. And we know that it will be at least 2 to 3 years before we start making progress on actually doing some of those projects and issuing the debentures. So that gives us several years where we can put 10 million in. So what we're basically doing is trying to build up a little bit of a war chest so that when we do issue the debt, we can use that money to pay the principal and the interest off, and that we don't have to come back and say, whoops, now we have to actually raise the tax rate to fund everything. So we're trying to save up in advance to pay for it. That's the basic concept. So,
okay.
I think that this is good in terms of affordability. When you look at debt, what you really want to understand is, can we afford to make the debt payments on this? No different than when you buy a house, you sit down and you say, well, can I afford the mortgage payments? Well, same thing with the debt. It's, can we afford that? If you look at our debt payments right now, they're 4.5% of our revenue, which is extraordinarily low. The provincial guideline says don't go over 15. We're at 4.5. So, and what we're doing here is we're adding in debt for strategic projects, but we're adding in the funding in advance so that we don't actually have to start cutting out projects or raising additional taxes to pay it back.
Okay. Thank you very much. And Councillor Austin, I see that you have an additional question. I'm going to ask you to come back again. At this point, we are over to the mayor.
Thank you, Chair. Good discussion, folks. Very good discussion. Very positive. Councillor Lovelace mentioned that there are things Calgary does that we don't do. I'm tempted to say that there's lots of things we do that they don't do. If we had their snow clearing standards, we'd save millions of dollars. Because they don't clear snow like we do here in good old Halifax. But it's year over year that really matters, not the number of services that are involved. I just want to say, you know, we're at the beginning of a process, colleagues, and I say this for some of the newer folks. You know, people have called me the boss. I'm not the boss, I'm the mayor. I'm one of 17, but I do have been through this process, and I just want to share a couple of things. I don't think we've ever started off by adopting a general tax rate that stayed the same all the way through our budget deliberations. The first year I was here, we started off at 1.8% and we ended up at 0. Councillor Outset, Councillor Mason, Councillor Hensby may recall that, but there have been similar circumstances as well. So don't get hung up so much on that. This is to give finance a chance to go away and put something together that they can then come back to us and say, based on that, this is where we are. Is it enough? Do you like it? Is the bed too big? Is the bed too small? Is the porridge too hot? Is it too cold? And we can adjust as we go. We spent a lot of time yesterday on and other meetings on identifying our strategic priorities. It's been said, and the incoming president of the United States is credited with saying this himself on many occasions. Don't tell me what you value, show me your budget, and I'll tell you what you value. We are now going through the process of putting our values into action. So this is a really important process. But I think it's really important for us all to understand, and I know that you do, that we all have different points of view. Some of us want a lower tax rate, some of us want a higher tax rate. Every single person on this screen that I see over the next 2 months will see something that they're going to want to add or adjust in the budget. I know that because it's always happened before. We've had vastly differing points of view as to what the budget should look like at the end, but I've always been very pleased with the respect that we've shown each other as councillors in coming up with a final decision and going forward. As I've said before, this council is not a family. We all have families, and it denigrates families to say that your sports team or your political team is a family. It's not a family, but it is a team. And so I would just say that, you know, we will hear detail. We will have different points of view. We're not all going to get what we want, but we work at it together. And if we do that, we will come out with something that reflects the people that we represent, the hardworking, diverse population that Halifax has become. And we'll figure it out together with respect for each other. Because when you haven't got respect for political points of view, TV is full of what happens if that goes to extreme. So let's just work together on this, respect the work of staff, which I know everybody does. Thank them for the leadership they've shown. It's a long road yet, but we'll get there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Daigle-Gammon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I know it's 3 minutes, but 15 pages of notes already. So if you want very copious minutes, the shared learning is amazing, to listen to everybody and to understand the perspectives. And my goodness, I love Mr. Mayor, your just comment about working together and with respect. It's just such a nice foundation. It's just a nice way to work. I'm a mentor of mine once always told me a long time ago that the devil is always in the details. And so I think over the coming weeks, we're going to see the details and know where the angels and devils are sometimes. But one of the things that has me a little worried, and I guess it's because I'm always thinking out, but on page 5 of the report, it shows that 31 million coming from the feds allows for really the balanced budget, short version in a way. But if you look at year 2, 3, and 4, that budget gap of 56 million, 61.5 million, and 59 million, that has me a little concerned. And I know that we're only looking at this year, but I guess at what point, Jane, do we start seeing changes in those year 2, 3, and 4? That probably comes after this budget, and I suppose some experience as we go through the fiscal year. But those numbers are a little bit unnerving, and we'll have to find that budget gap.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to the committee. These are planning numbers. It's to really give you the context and give you a sense of where we are. So they're assumptions. They really are. Every budget is an assumption. We do our best, even with 21, 22, but there's going to be a few things that aren't correct. So what we'll do is, decisions that get made. Are you getting feedback from me now?
We are getting feedback, yes. We're getting a buzzing sound.
Yeah, I'm getting
but
it.
We are able to hear you fairly clearly.
Okay, I'll continue then. So as I said, so we will continue to refine these. We will see things. So decisions that get made at the end of this budget process, we'll map those through in the 3-year outlook. So for example, if we don't take out that loan, that'll come out. Things that we do in reserves, we'll true all those up. So we'll be keeping an eye on that. The budget process next year, we'll start this a bit earlier. We also give updates on a quarterly basis through audit and finance that you sit on, and then we'll be able, and then those information reports go to council. I'm just thinking right now it may be a good idea to update some of our assumptions going forward for the fiscal outlook. As we move forward, and if we have anything substantive, we do a risk thing there. So it'll be that continuous thing. So this time next year, it will be truing up of 22, 23, and then the outlook, and then as it follows through. It's just really to give you a bit of context, so you know, you are mindful of where we are. They're big numbers. I won't deny that. They're manageable. Remember, the revenue is understated. There is some tax room. So as long as we're prudent, you know, it's really about how we manage it. It's about the affordability of it, and the competitiveness across the full tax base for both residential and commercial.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jane. We are on our third time going through, so I'm going to hand it over to Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just the second half of my debt question. So we're mapping out a long-term strategy, and I guess maybe we'll get some more detail coming. I'm curious about our philosophy in the here and now, because the report indicates and presentation will be changing our debt levels year to year, and so I'm presuming that that is not for the big strategic projects. And I'm just wondering, like, philosophically, where we are going with that kind of routine debt spending, because I get the reason. I mean, I don't love debt because it eventually means you pay more in the end, but there's a need to spread out the cost of large assets over time. So it's a tool, but if you're doing things like borrowing money to do capital projects like build your neighborhood playground, where that's more of a routine capital thing, I'm not as convinced that is the right way to go. And so I'm just curious as to what that number in there, what's behind that.
Thank you, Councillor. So are you speaking about the current debt numbers that we have in
Yes.
the budget? Okay,
Yeah,
so the current
it was 10 million
10.
more a year.
Yeah, so that will come out in the capital budget. I'm not being vague. We just don't have that worked out. That is the envelope that we need to work within. So on the specifics, I can, at a high level, talk about debt policy, and I agree with you what you're saying. We should not be borrowing for general life cycle. So things that we should be paying from capital from operating, different things like that, just from being a prudent point of view. Debt should be used for either intergenerational assets, so like rec facilities that span over a number of years. And then that way, the people that use it over the life cycle of the asset, they're paying for it. And then other ones that are fairly large. I mean, it is, if we did our buses, our replacement buses out of the base capital budget, capital from operating, it wouldn't leave an awful lot of money left over to do street repaving and things like that. So it is having that line of sight as to what it is that you're doing. The other thing that we need to do, just good debt policy, good financial management, is matching the term of the debt to the life of the asset as much as possible. So, you know, if you have something, we've been tending to take out 10-year debt, which is short. So if we're using debt to finance a rec facility that's got a 40-year life, we're running that in over 10 years, which is using up the room. So we should be matching that to 20 or 25 years. Buses, by a reverse, we do not do this, but you shouldn't take out a term of debt for 20 years if you know your bus is only going to last 14. So it's all that matching, which really is, as Bruce was speaking about on affordability, that's what it is. It's about how affordable is that debt, and making sure that you have sound policy. And those, to me, those are fundamentals that really stand you in good stead as you go forward. We are in record low. Okay.
Oh, no, thank you. I was just going to say thank you for that. That is the answer I was hoping to hear. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. We have no further speakers listed in the chat. If anybody would like to come in with another question or two, then we have the chat available.
Mr. Chair?
Oh. Yes, ma'am.
I do have the answer to Councillor Cleary's question from the beginning regarding the split of commercial and residential. I was just typing it in the chat. So what we're seeing is the split doesn't really change that much. It's 63 to 34. I'm rounding these up, and I'll send this out for 21-22. So 64 residential, 63 residential, 37 commercial. It goes to 63.7 to 36.3, up to 64.2 to 35, and then 64.3% to 35.75% in 24-25. So what we are seeing is that the residential continues to grow relative to the commercial. But I will send this. I'll circulate this chart, and I think there was a request for some other information, and we'll get that package together so that when we do the business unit budgets, you have that package and that information in advance. So thank you, Mr. Chair, for your indulgence.
Oh, not a problem. Thank you very much, and thank you for that information, Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just briefly wanted to say thanks to Jane and Bruce and her staff, not only for getting that piece of information, but just for the whole day. It's been enlightening in terms of information, but also the discussion around council. I think, you know, democracy is a wonderful thing, and having all of these different viewpoints come together to create the budget that we're going to be putting together is fantastic. And so just kudos to my colleagues, new and old, and kudos to staff. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. And I don't see anybody else who is looking to speak. I also would like to thank staff and my colleagues around the table for going through this. It has been informational, it has been helpful, and I look forward to more constructive discussion in the future. At this point, with nobody else looking to speak, I would ask for the question.
Call for the question.
So over to the clerk. Voice.
District 1, Councillor Daigle-Gammon.
Voting in favor of the motion.
Councillor Hensby.
Affirmative.
Councillor Kent.
In favor.
In favor, thank you. Councillor Purdy.
In favor of the motion.
Councillor Austin.
In favor.
Councillor Mancini.
In favor of the motion.
Councillor Mason.
For the motion.
Councillor Smith.
For.
Councillor Cleary.
Knowing that we can still change things after this, yes.
Councillor Morris. Councillor Morris.
In favor.
Thank you. Councillor Cuddle. Oh, I see Councillor Cuddle's actually left the meeting. Councillor Stoddard.
In favor of the motion.
Councillor Lovelace.
Voting yes, because we can change it.
Councillor Blackburn.
Voting in favor of the motion.
Councillor Russell.
In favor of the motion.
And I believe Councillor Outpit has left the meeting. So Mayor Savage.
In favor of the motion, and so thanks to staff, but also to Chairman Paul. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And so that motion passes. I'm thrilled. So staff can now go and continue working on the budget and bring it back to us at our next budget meeting, which will be Wednesday, January 20th, 1 week from today. So I look forward to seeing everybody there. And at this point, I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
Moved.
Thank you very much. We are adjourned.
See you guys later.
We'll
Thank
see you later.
Thank you, Jane and team. Sensational.
Thank you. That was awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.